Hey there. Good afternoon. Good morning, depending on where you're located. I'm Steve Taylor. I'm the host of MSP Webinars. How's everyone doing today? You guys hearing me okay? Everything sounding good? Looking all right? Perfect. Thank you. So, we are joined by a very, very cool guest today. His name is Ehab from Plurilock. And where did he go? Let me re-invite him on the screen. I think I might have done something here. Thank you, Ian. Right, so, man, we've got a lot going on here in the next couple weeks. So I just want to take a moment and go over all of that. So on Thursday, we have another security presentation. However, this is from Sophos. Sophos is going to show us their MSP Connect platform for the antivirus, Intercept X. They'll probably show us some hardware stuff when it comes to firewalls and maybe even some Wi-Fi. So they'll have a lot to show us. And next week's going to be good too. We are joined by SolarWinds again. I know this is starting to feel like a monthly thing. That's because it was set up as like a 5, maybe 6 month thing where we were doing one at a time. So Thursday next week is going to be an N Central tech demo from SolarWinds. And then we're going to be joined the Tuesday after that by Cloud Jumper. And that one's going to be really cool. We're going to talk about desktop as a service, workstation as a service, RDS, basically doing everything in the cloud. So I'm really excited. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up, guys. So just to do some housekeeping, if you will. Questions, please ask tons of questions. This is going to be, this is a product I've never seen anything like this before. So I know I'm going to have tons of questions. It's okay for you to be skeptical and ask skeptical questions. I would like to think that they will be able to address those in a way that shows you it's not snake oil. So without further ado, and make sure you use the questions section for questions. And then we've also got a poll area. So if you could go and answer the poll questions, that would be super. I'll be watching YouTube and this here. I did not put this one on Facebook today, but if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the YouTube chat or in the Ask a Question section here in the webinar itself. With that said, Ehab, please take it away, my friend. You'll need to share your screen again.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Steve. And thank everybody for joining us today. It's actually a great pleasure to be talking about the Plurilock technology, which is a very cool technology that I'll go over. So the presentation will basically be 2 sections. One is just some PowerPoints discussing the technology and overview of what we do, and then there's going to be a demo portion at the end that gives you an idea of what to expect when using the product. In essence, traditional security as well as authentication methods are designed to put up stumbling blocks for people by challenging them at several points throughout their workday to identify themselves. So most of the time, end users, they have to remember and enter and frequently change passwords. And that's not even mentioned really, multi-factor authentication yet. So what this has done is it's actually created an environment where not only is security getting in the way of productivity, but it's actually having the opposite effect as users find ways around them. This is where artificial intelligence and behavioral biometrics can actually change the whole authentication game. Think of a typical workday where somebody logs into the workstation. In more secure environments, what they usually do is that they may use a PKI or a CAC card, for example, to log in along with some PIN code and a password. Once they're logged in, or even while they're logging in, as well as after, they might be prompted for second factor authentication, depending on which application they're actually trying to access. And on top of that, of course, some of the applications that they have access to require extra levels of authentication, and that the user has to log in again. So, for example, it could be a second factor authentication or an additional level where they have to do some kind of a step-up authentication to make sure that they're having access to that extra secure app that they're trying to gain access to. The interesting thing about all this is that even in spite of all this, it still leaves about 99% of the session unprotected, because between every additional point in time authentication, and think of it, that's sort of key today, is that all of these are point in time authentication decisions. Between each of these decisions, the workstation is actually completely open for others to use. If the user walks away from it, for example, if somebody is able to somehow remote desktop into it, or even a malicious USB stick that gets put in, can actually do a lot of damage. Speaking of damage, 4 out of 5 data breaches actually use weak or stolen passwords, which either belong to the user or actually are default devices that are left with, or servers that are left with the default password on there. And that's essentially where the problem with security lies. Between password policies, where you have to bend over backwards to get a password to be accepted when you're changing it, the special hardware that can actually break, as well as cause the user to carry something with them, like as I said, a PKI card or some kind of a PIN device, as well as MFA, all of which can be stolen or even worked around. The current security methods don't really seem to be working that well. In fact, this is actually a big problem for a lot of CIOs. They know users are often the weakest link in the security chain, but adding more cumbersome security protocols usually comes at the expense of user experience, to a point where users end up putting up post-it notes on their monitor with their password on it, for example, or taping their PKI cards into workstations. And we've seen all of these in customers and companies that we've dealt with, and I'm sure most of you have actually seen that too. And this has actually been the cause of a lot of hesitation on some CIOs or CISOs to enact some of the more security for their end users, and is therefore used by hackers as their number one MO whenever they're doing any kind of attack. In fact, when you look at how most breaches actually take place, they usually follow a similar pattern. First, you have to get access to the network. If you're an insider, you might be able to exploit the access that you already have to the system. If you're an outsider, you probably steal some kind of credentials, maybe through spear phishing attack or some other means, or exploit some kind of vulnerability to get access to that system. Once you're in, your goal is to actually elevate your privileges in order to be able to issue any kind of commands to get access to resources. Hackers, of course, often create new accounts at this stage to try and maintain and remain undetected a little bit longer than usual. And usually during this phase, this is where lateral movement takes place. So, for example, as a hacker, of course, unless you're lucky, the system that you've gained access to usually doesn't contain whatever information you're looking for, whether that's credit card information or personal information or IP, for example. So the next step is to actually move around in the network and get closer to the ultimate goal that you're trying to reach, and just search around and look around. And this is where you usually try to elevate your privileges, find more vulnerabilities and more servers, etc., to be able to find more of that. And from there, of course, you repeat the process until you get the access that you need and the permissions that to go after your ultimate target. And then you're pretty much free to wreak havoc or whatever you have in mind, whether it's theft or business disruption or anything else that you're actually looking to do as a hacker. Now, unfortunately, in many cases, there are a lot of things that we do as IT that actually end up making it easier for attackers to carry on with their attack chain. Whether it's weak authentication, stolen or compromised credentials, poor password or key management, shared accounts, as well as lack of monitoring and no limits on the lateral movement. Now, of course, there is good news in that there is a way to stop attackers at multiple points in this kill chain. Remember, what we're looking at is more continuous. and to correct a lot of the management and admin shortcomings that make it easier for attackers to succeed in their attacks. That's where behavioral biometrics and continuous authentication comes into play. In a nutshell, think of artificial intelligence that monitors the user's behavior and creates a profile that accounts for normal behavior of this user. So it then runs continuously in the background and not just at points in time. And once it detects any kind of abnormality, it actually takes action based on that. All this while it's being actually invisible to the end user, because all they need to do is go about their day-to-day business. They don't need to do any different activities or any kind of disruptions to their day-to-day business. And this is where behavioral biometrics are, and that's what behavioral biometrics are, as well as BioTracker. So BioTracker is Plurilock's product that uses behavioral biometrics. What BioTracker does is that we use your typing rhythm and mouse movements to identify who you are. This is because different people have different cadence and rhythm when using the keyboard and mouse, and this is what we use to identify you. One important point to note here, however, is that we monitor how you type something and not what you're typing or what you click on. This is actually important to note because in today's privacy-aware world, we want to make sure that we have that distinction. So how does it work? Remember, it's frictionless to the user because the user doesn't even know it's there. It's frictionless to the IT team because it's autonomous and it's running in the background and only notifies you if you want it to be notified, and I'll talk more about that later. We have a lightweight and easy deployable agent that you can mass deploy easily to on your customer sites or install it separately on your computers. It's both Mac and PC compatible. It requires no additional hardware, unlike a lot of other solutions, and it doesn't use much RAM or CPU. It requires the user to absolutely do nothing else other than just use their workstation normally, and do their day-to-day business. What we do is that we register the user. So the registration and the enrollment are both automatic. So once the user logs into the endpoint after you set it up, the system hasn't seen them before, what it will do is that it will register them and begin to enroll them on the device. Enrollment usually allows us to build an initial profile for that user. And once they're enrolled, the system automatically starts to protect that user. Now, bear in mind, this actually protects the whole endpoint, not just a specific application or website. So you've got your whole endpoint actually protected against anybody else using it. When a registered enrolled user begins to use that endpoint, the agent actually starts collecting data on how they're using that keyboard and mouse and encrypts that data together with the device identifiers and some unique agent keys and send them to the server to process. The server basically then analyzes the data against the profile that we have on file and makes a decision on whether the user is who they are claiming to be. And all these events are comprehensively logged, whether it's negative events or positive events. There is the capability, of course, to do false alarms that allow the system to learn and adapt to the user's profile over time. And this is key with machine learning and artificial intelligence, is that the system will continue to keep learning your style. And as you evolve as a human being and that style changes over time, whether sometimes it's due to injury or due to other things, it actually can learn that style over time.
So with that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I see some questions that I feel like we should ask right now. So if someone switches to typing one-handed, does it immediately block them out? How does that work?
You get to configure how it should act. So it can just log that in the background and send you as an administrator an alarm saying that there's something weird going on. You can set it so that it challenges the user, so it locks the workstation. They have to re-authenticate again. Or you can set it with more complex rules, for example, and send that information to a SIM system or some other system where you can escalate, for example, security permissions on the network or reduce the security permissions on the network so that we can reduce whatever damage that person is doing. So depending on how you want the system to act.
And it's a ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I got to see how advanced the AI is. Will the system know why I'm typing with one hand?
Why you're typing with one hand?
Yeah.
it's not going to know why you're typing with one hand, but it will know that you are typing with one hand, or at least it will know that you are typing differently from what from your usual method. We've actually noticed the accuracy level of the system. We've noticed is that it will actually detect when somebody's fingernails are longer than usual, for example, because that slightly changes your cadence and the way you move between keys. So we've actually noticed some difference, and it will recognize that difference. It's that sensitive.
Now you realize that's kind of creepy, right? I mean, if you've watched any of my webinars, I say ridiculous things. So, I mean, that's kind of creepy, though, right? I mean, you've got a system that is, I feel like Big Brother watching me on my computer. And Glenn, I don't want to know what you're doing if you're typing one-handed, but if it knows that, I'm concerned.
Well, why would you type on one hand? You have a sandwich in the other, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
So, as I said, Steve, the key differentiator here is, remember, we don't know what you're typing. We keep no context of that whatsoever. All we're doing is the cadence. So how quickly you move between keys, how often you keep keys pressed. So yes, there is definitely an element of, as you called it, creepiness there. However, the one thing to note is that there is no intrusion. There is nothing that all it's doing, the whole sole purpose of it being there is to identify if somebody else is using a workstation.
Okay, so I mean, let's keep it 100 here. We're all adults. If someone goes to like Pornhub or whatever, you're not actually detecting. You're not. How do I want to say this? You're not doing like key logging, where you're keeping a record of everything that they've typed in. You're just keeping a record of how they've typed it.
Yeah, we're just keeping a record of how they've typed in. Of course, it could be that when they go to Pornhub, somehow their typing mechanism changes, or their typing style changes for whatever reason. We will recognize that cadence. If it changes, we will recognize it.
Okay, so it measures how quickly we've typed in Pornhub, not the fact that we have typed in Pornhub.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. I just want you to know, don't be surprised if Pornhub is my example for the remainder of this webinar.
That's fine. It keeps it interesting.
All right, and then Ian said speed, rhythm, and cadence of typing behavior or mouse movements. And Dave said he wants to know if it keeps track of how long he lasted on Pornhub.
We don't know that you're in Pornhub. Again, unless you do something differently than when you're in Pornhub than you do normally. But even then, we'll eventually learn that.
Well, I think it checks every 3 to 5 seconds, so it probably won't even realize he's been there.
Exactly.
All right, so you said it does mouse. Now, I'm what you guys call a unicorn in the IT world. I'm an IT consultant that uses a Mac. So I've got the, and I don't know, I guess I should switch over to my video here. I've got this for my mouse. So I've got the Magic Trackpad. So, I mean, does it work the same way if it's a trackpad or a traditional handheld mouse?
That's a very good question. It works the same way per device. So we can differentiate the different devices that you're connected to. So if you use, for example, as you said, if you're if you're in the office, you're using a trackpad. But while you're on an airplane, for example, you're using, you're using a trackpad on the device, or you're using a mouse at other times at home, for example, or a docking station. We recognize these as different devices. And that's part of the reason why we get accurate results, is that because it doesn't matter how good your algorithm is, there are going to be differences in the micro and the milliseconds of typing between different devices, and different devices will actually act a little bit differently.
So if I go and get a new, like let's say I upgrade from the first Magic Trackpad to the second Magic Trackpad, obviously there's hardware changes.
Correct.
So it's going to detect said change and understand that there's been a change when it's going and doing its job.
Correct. So the way that it normally works is once we've learned your typing style on one device, and once we've completely enrolled you, is we build what we call a master profile on you. That master profile is device independent, and think of it as sort of the average of all the devices that you typically use. So when you start using a new device that we've never seen before, what we're going to do is we're going to use your master profile to continue protecting your account. But at the same time, we're enrolling that device in the background so that we again learn your style and bring that back up to the master profile.
All right. Let's see. Next. Gosh, I had a question and I lost it. So these profiles. And this is something that you can just say wait for later when I show you the admin thing. But like, do I as the administrator get to kind of like see what a person's profile looks like?
You don't see the details of the profile, but you see the different devices, and you see the you see how enrolled they are. But as you said, I will show you that later.
Okay, great. Let me look and see if there's any other questions relevant with what we've seen right now. Would this be considered an element of UEBA?
Good question. It is, in fact, our we have two modes of our product. We've got what we call the BioTracker Aware product, which is just an aware only. It's a monitoring only solution, and that really is we categorize that as a UBA solution. And we've got the Defend product, which is more of an EDR.
Got it.
Because it takes action and protects the workstation.
One guy here says 95 or more % of his computer usage, excuse me, is mouse driven. So is it still going to be pretty accurate when they're just using a mouse?
Yes, simply because of the fact that we treat the mouse and the keyboard equally in terms of how in the input. So if most of your usage is mouse, well, it's part of machine learning. We've learned your style, and your style consists of mostly mouse, and that's what we're protecting.
Okay. And then because I like to ask ridiculous questions throughout, not that we haven't already gotten ridiculous, looking at the third picture, it looks like if someone with different colored hands tries to use the keyboard, it denies them.
If someone with different hands.
It just looks like, the lighter hands are being denied. So
I will make sure I keep the same color for next time. Thanks for the feedback.
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm going to save that one for later. What about common use computers, like ones that are in like a conference room?
The way that it works right now is that it is linked to an account, right? So if you're using a computer in a conference room that is common use, as long as you're logging in as a user who is associated with an account onto that computer, then you're fine. You're still protected. If it's one shared account on that computer, then that becomes a little bit trickier because we do associate one account with one user.
So if they're let's say they're not using like Active Directory, they all just log in with the same account, then it's better to just not install the agent on that computer, it sounds like.
Yes, because or disable the agent simply because of the fact that if you're going to have multiple people on that same computer, then yes, the agent will go compute. It is one of the things we are working on as one of our use cases is to be able to recognize multiple users for one profile, but we haven't had that much demand for it yet in terms of customer requirements.
And we've touched on this quite a bit. How can we provide some type of confidence to our customer that this is not a keylogger, other than saying, trust us, it's not a keylogger?
How do you prove a negative? that's, I guess, that's always the interesting thing there. It's you. The interesting thing is that once you set it up, you don't, everything is encrypted. Everything is all the raw data never leaves your client, and it's everything. The only things that are sent to the server are sort of aggregated telemetry and information for that user, right? So really, I mean, it's there.
Well, but that right there, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that right there is already kind of a slippery slope explanation that was really hard to get out for some reason. So, people have heard Windows 10, for example, back when everyone was all, Microsoft is invading my privacy. That was the big thing. Microsoft is watching the telemetry data and all that other stuff. But we do know that Microsoft is using the information. So they're using, what you type, where you go, what you search for on the computer, everything. So that way, they can use that information to advertise to you and give you targeted ads. And I'm not saying you're advertising. I'm just saying, it's like that double-edged sword where, like, I get it. Me being an IT guy, I understand. Like, I believe you when you tell me that it's not doing it. But how do we, the technical guys that actually know what we're talking about, explain this to our customer who has no flipping clue what we're talking about? I think is the real question.
Yes, I mean, it's a good point, right? And I think of it as no different than other cybersecurity products, like firewall logs. I mean, firewall logs, they know when you've been to the Pornhub, right? So in many ways, what we do is a lot less intrusive and a lot more privacy aware than other cybersecurity contextual data. You look at other AI and machine learning based products out there on the market today. A lot of them are a lot more intrusive because they actually look at what you're doing and not how you're doing it. We're only looking at how you're doing it.
Okay, that's good. I think we're good to just move on for now.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you.
So one of the really cool things about BioTracker is that the way that it was built and it was designed was to actually work very well with other technologies. So these are just some examples that show that BioTracker is actually built on a microservices-based architecture. And it's therefore available to integrate, whether you want to integrate it to an IAM solution or an EDR or a PAM or SIEM systems for your customers that may already be using it. One use case, for example, that some of our customers do is that they've integrated it with we've integrated with CallSign in one customer site, where instead of doing a step-up authentication to some of their more sensitive applications by their user, so instead of popping up a CallSign second-factor authentication to access a specific app, for example, they will actually look at the BioTracker agent and look at the level of confidence of that agent or for this particular user over the last little while, for example, a few minutes. And if there's a high level of confidence from the BioTracker agent that this user is who they say they are, well, you know what? We're skipping the whole CallSign second-factor authentication altogether, and we're just letting that user through. Now, if the confidence is low, then we can actually challenge them with that step-up authentication to make sure that they are who they say they are, or at least they have that access. So the system is actually designed to work very well with other technologies. It is, as I mentioned before, microservices based, and the architecture is open for lots of different types of integrations. Some of the use cases that, of course, we always like to say this because sometimes when you have really cool technologies, you get so distracted by what it does that you forget what you can use it for. But think of some of these things that are here: stolen credentials, for example, whether it's through phishing or data leak or anything else. Essentially means that if somebody else has got your user ID and password and logs in as yourself, they can actually, they won't be able to get very far because we're going to recognize that right away. Think of named license-based scenarios where you want only the person who is paying for that license to be able to use it, and nobody and not to share it with other people. So again, this is very useful because the way that you're moving around and typing in and using the application will actually determine that you're the one who is who should be doing it. User substitution. So it's happened a lot, especially in a lot of offshore contracted and outsourced employment, where the person who shows up on the first day to work is not the person who you actually interviewed and accepted and did a background check on. It does happen quite often. So that's again one of the things that where BioTracker can actually help that user substitution at any given time. Things like insider threat, where somebody goes in and tries to use somebody else's computer, for example, to access or do things that they shouldn't be doing. Remote access Trojan, USB rubber ducky attacks. So the rubber ducky attacks are actually a very interesting case because typically, when we've tried it with any kind of USB scripting attack, you put in that USB stick, and within less than a second, you are locked out. It doesn't even have because it is so different than the way humans type that it can actually lock you out in just no time without even knowing what's going on. When it comes to phishing, I mean, we're not stopping the end user from actually clicking on a specific link or entering the information. However, once that account has been compromised and somebody else tries to come in and use it, that's where we can definitely help. One of the interesting use cases that we've found in the market as well is the regular attribution. So since we're being ridiculous, think of Homer Simpson sitting on the control panel of the nuclear power station, right? And Homer does something stupid. And half a city block goes down, for example, or half a city goes down in terms of and no power there. Then he said, nope, it wasn't me, right? So attribution is where, based on the actions on the workstation, now you can for sure tell that, hey, this was the user who was logged in, and based on the type of actions that they've done, this is what this was most likely Homer Simpson. User carelessness, where you leave your computer unlocked, and and when you think of it sort of in very simple terms, think of it as an invisible second factor or multi-factor authentication. Where you've got an additional layer of protection that is invisible to the end user. They're not doing anything outside of what they're ordinarily doing, but at the same time, they're actually continually being protected, which leads, of course, to regulatory compliance. I'm not going to get on there because that's usually kind of too boring for anybody to listen to. So in a nutshell, you get all this with the added bonus of being able to eliminate or relax a lot of your password policies, for example. A lot of CIOs, a lot of CISOs actually want to make things simpler for their end user. However, it's tough to go and say, I want to make things easier for the end user without having some kind of a compensating control. And everybody knows nowadays, even NIST have come and acknowledged recently that having complex password and the rotation and all these policies that make it very difficult for the end user are not really having that much of an impact on cybersecurity. And so a CISO can take this product to their board and say, hey, if with BioTracker, I can relax a lot of this stuff, which actually improves a lot of my user satisfaction. It improves productivity because I no longer have to keep logging in and out all the time. As well as I can, in many cases, for example, skip multi-factor authentication if I need to. And I can increase, for example, the inactivity timeout so the computer doesn't get locked out every 5 minutes if they don't do anything on there. And the really cool thing is no user training. It just sort of works by itself once you've set it up, and it runs continuously and protects continuously as opposed to a given point in time. So just to give you a quick, so what I'll do is I'll give you a quick demo. So I'll pause here for questions first. But essentially, just to summarize this, BioTracker uses AI, and it builds a profile on the users by the way that they type on a keyboard and mouse, not what they type or click on. We use that profile to provide continuous identity assurance and protect against identity threats. And all that while we maintain user satisfaction because there's no additional steps or interruptions to the end user. Any questions before I go into a 5-minute demo?
We still have plenty of questions, actually. All right, so it doesn't seem like this today can do away with passwords, but is that a goal for you guys?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that, Steve.
Well, the question that somebody asked was, can we do away with passwords? I'm going to assume the answer is no.
That's a good question. I mean, it's funny when Plurilock first started. One of the things that we stated as our mission is to eliminate passwords. At this stage, with what we have today, no, I don't think so. But I think the way that cybersecurity as a field in general, using machine learning and artificial intelligence, and when you start having a lot of contextual signals around the user activity, so keyboard and mouse are just one of them. Think of, for example, when you look at one specific user, what's their IP address? Where are they logging in from right now, for example? Where's their phone located, for example? There are a whole bunch of additional signals that you can use all together to potentially say, hey, you know what? If this is a user that's coming in, we may get one point to a point where we can eliminate passwords. So as we get smarter about cybersecurity, as we start learning more about what people do and how people do it, we may potentially be able to just maybe not completely eliminate passwords, but just replace them with a passphrase that you don't even need to enter the same way every time. It could be just a different passphrase that you have to just type in every time, for example, and that could be a replacement for a password, along with some other factor, for example, whether we still use CAC cards or anything else. We can depends on the organization, of course. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. How should I feel about you guys installing an agent on my endpoints that can ostensibly see the keystrokes?
Don't feel uncomfortable because we see numbers between the keystrokes. We see milliseconds. We don't see what you are typing. All right, so there's nothing contextual about what you're doing. The only thing that we do is just a telemetry of how you get between keys.
Now, but you do see, because I'm just trying to think here of how involved this needs to be. It's not just the number of milliseconds in between keystrokes, because you might still have some hunt and pecker typing people out there. So wouldn't you also need to understand that if the last letter they hit was A and the next letter they hit is P, I mean, that little finger's got to travel a long way across the keyboard to make the number of milliseconds longer?
Yes, and so that's a very good question, because the way that it works is not. I might be able, for example, to move between if I'm typing the word help, right? So I might be able to move between the H and the E key, for example. So there is a difference in time between my movement between H and E than it is between the E and the L, for example, right? So yes, we definitely know the time that it takes you between these two keys, but we never actually put them together to create any kind of help, and we never log them in a way that will allow you to, for example, reconstruct it. So think of, for example, the profile would consist of, on average, Steve goes between H and E in 0.5 milliseconds, for example, right? On average, right? And then as the H and E are sort of typed, and we compare that specific telemetry to what we have on profile. And that's what we call the sort of the coverage of a profile. So we know exactly what kind of, how long it takes you between specific different keys, but we don't really know what the keys are, what the actual big letter would be, or sorry, big word would be.
Does the computer need to be continuously connected to the internet for this thing to work?
In our current version, yes. It has to be connected to the server. We do have an offline version coming out probably within the next 6 months.
And what happens if the laptop is stolen?
If the laptop's stolen, I mean, if assuming you're able to log in, if you are able to log in into the laptop, then it will pretty much, if you're connected, of course, and we're protecting you, then we will take action. So depending on how you've configured the laptop, you will get locked out as soon as you start using a computer, assuming you manage to log in.
Okay, so, in that perfect storm that I like to call most end users, we're going to go through a scenario. I lost my laptop. I don't have a password on the laptop. I don't need one. I have Plurilock. I think did I lose my ears? No, I didn't. Weird. So I have Plurilock, so I don't need a password. So the thief takes it to a Panera or whatever, opens it up, doesn't connect to Wi-Fi, and starts looking through my files and finds my tax returns, which have my Social Security, yada yada yada, everything they need to steal my identity. Because I didn't have a password on my computer, and because it's not connected to Wi-Fi, you're not protecting me, right?
With the current version, you're not.
Okay.
Right, but you will be soon. And I see one of the questions, for example, if nothing leaves the system, why should I know? Why would it not work offline? That's a good question, and that's part of the reason why we're moving in that direction. Is initially it was set up in where a lot of our customers were using virtualized environments, so they needed an internet connection to get in anyway. There was no way they could actually access, and that's more of a high secure environment. But as we're moving, as the technology is becoming a bit more mainstream, remember we're cutting edge here, right? So as the technology is becoming a little bit more stream, what's ending up happening is that now we're getting smaller organizations and smaller companies that are more interested in having these different types of scenarios where offline use is required.
Okay. I mean, it's not the answer I wanted to hear, but you came ready to answer, so that's good. We've talked about keyloggers enough. There was one person, they asked what the difference between this and a keylogger is. I think it's basically the keylogger logs what's typed. This is just logging the speed, rhythm, and cadence of how you behave, but isn't keeping track of what you typed, right?
Correct.
Okay. What SIEM, SIEM products does this support?
The API is pretty open, so it can be, as long as your SIEM is open, it can do it. We have out of the box configurable connection to Splunk.
Okay. Splunk, I don't know if that's a good one or not. I'll be honest, I'm not a guy that uses SIEMs. Zach is my resident SIEM expert. He'll probably tell you I'm saying it wrong too. Who knows? I don't. What about an API? So we can query the data. Like, for example, we use a SIEM or something else that you don't have out of the box support with.
So yeah, that's actually a very good question too. So what ends up the way that the APIs work with Plurilock is that you've got two options. You can query the Plurilock API and the Plurilock server. So you can say, for example, hey, I'd like to know what the confidence level in Steve's usage of that workstation looks like right now or in the last few minutes. And Plurilock will return that confidence level and tells you, hey, we think, based on the way that he was typing user ID, it doesn't really look like Steve. Or it looks, we're pretty confident that it is Steve. So that's one time. The other type is what we call outbound. So Plurilock then sends these logs and events to a SIEM or to some other system, for example, for like let's say, for example, Duo. So for whatever reason, your organization does not want to lock an end user out when we detect an anomaly. What we can do, for example, then is that Plurilock or BioTracker will send Duo a step-up authentication request. So as soon as we detect that anomaly, you'll get prompted on the screen to step up your authentication. So to enter a PIN number, to enter something that would make sure that it is still you. So either way, the integration actually works, and the API support both of these.
Awesome. Now, Glenn wants to talk pricing. He wants to know what it costs. And
Let's
I think the to clarify, MSP pricing. So obviously we would be buying it and like reselling it or packaging it in with our bundle.
let's what I would recommend you do is go to our MSP page, so plurilock.com/MSP. Pricing always changes. Pricing is always variable. Pricing is always depending on the MSP and the business. So I don't really want to talk about pricing in general terms because it doesn't make sense.
But isn't there like an MSRP that you could at least start us off with?
Not really.
Okay. So everyone here is saying that means it's expensive. So it's like when you go to the ConnectWise website and you're like, I just want to know how much this costs. Call for details. That means it's expensive. So
well, I mean, yeah, it's not expensive. No, because one of the things to bear in mind is that as a small and upcoming company with bleeding edge technologies, one of the things that we do try as we go to market is we try to be flexible as we start to build our customer base. So that's why we typically don't want to say prices publicly, simply because of the fact that it just it positions us into a category that we may not fit in. And it's and just to answer your question, no, it's not expensive. Okay. We are in line with pretty much every other EDR solution and SIEM any EDR solution out there or UBA solution out there.
All right, so I see Ian put in the chat under $10 per user per month. So that could be 2 or 3, or that could be $9.99. We don't know, but I would say that is potentially reasonable. Potentially. I would like to see how are you guys trying to position yourselves? Because obviously this isn't something that we can compare to like Sophos antivirus or Bitdefender, because you're not protecting machines from the software malicious threats. You're protecting machines from physical bad actors. And I feel like that there's really not. Do you have any competitors in your space right now?
I think it's when you talk about competitors, it's an interesting question, because simply because of the way that we focus on the person. So when you look at competitors, you can say, okay, do I compete with endpoint protection solutions? Well, maybe. Do I compete with an antivirus solution? Well, you could say I'm protecting the endpoint, so yes, I am. However, at the same time, I'm not really protecting it against viruses. I'm protecting against insider threats or users.
And that's exactly, yeah. I mean, you just repeated what I said there. So with that, do you actually have any competitors?
Think of every user behavior analytics solution out there as potential frenemy, meaning that they could be competitors in certain scenarios. But at the same time, we are a very good complement to a lot of these solutions out there because we provide that additional human layer in terms of signal.
Okay.
And the same with with UBA, right? Because the products that we do have actually fit within there.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric. I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
I think he's implying that you're dodging the question.
Yeah.
you're answering in a very political fashion when I'm asking yes or no questions. And they'll call you on it, unfortunately, here in MSP webinars. All right, so yes-ish, I think, is the answer I'm hearing to, do you have competitors in this industry? Sort of.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's There, and as I said, right, we look at competitors in two ways. One is, do they do and solve the same problem that we solve, but in a different way? That's
Right.
one way of looking at it.
Right.
Right. Or the other way of looking at it is, are they going after the same space? Or, there is a third category, for example, are they using behavioral biometrics? But anybody who's sort of using behavioral biometrics out there that we're seeing today are focusing on different use cases, usually fraud and web-based. We are protecting the endpoint. We're pretty much the only ones out there who are protecting the endpoint from a behavioral biometrics perspective.
Okay. I'm just trying to set you up for, I don't really know what I'm trying to set you up for. I had it in my mind. I had all these awesome questions and I've lost them. I don't like to dance. That's why. All right. So let's do this then. We know you've got some competition, but I feel like in the managed services space, I haven't seen anything like what you do yet. So are you familiar with any MSP type of companies that do what you do? And you don't have to name names. I'm just looking for a yes or a no.
Not at this stage. There isn't anybody out there who's actually really doing what we do from an MSP perspective, simply because there isn't anybody out there doing exactly what we're doing.
Fair enough. So that makes you very new, which is both exciting and scary. Okay. So with that, with you being really new, obviously you really have to prove yourself right now. And I think you guys know that. You're new. You already said you're young. You don't want to put yourself in a category where you don't belong. That type of stuff. But at the same time, like for an MSP, we don't see you guys being talked about other than, have you heard of Plurilock? Or who here is using Plurilock? Anyone? Show of hands. No, nobody. Okay. I mean that's. We're starting to hear the name. You guys are showing up on Reddit. You guys are showing up in Discord and all the other places. But I'm not hearing any, yes, we use it. We love it. I'm not even hearing, yeah, we tried it. It's awful. Like I'm just hearing nothing but, hey, they exist. So I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. And then I did a poll just now. 6 people have answered out of the 14 people that are here. Please, everyone else that has access to the poll, please answer this. The bottom question is the one I really care about right now. And while you guys are answering, I'm going to go through the poll questions one by one, just so you guys have an idea, Ian and Ehab. So how interested do you think your customers would be in this type of security product? The answers that I'm seeing here are 4 people have said somewhat interested. 4 have said not at all. Make that 5. And 3 have said very interested. Nobody has screamed, take my money. What do you think is this is going to cost per user per month? One person thought you were going to be charging over $20 a month per user. Everyone else thought it would be in the 1 to 10 range. My favorite question to ask, and it's always the same one that wins, and I'm okay with this. Star Wars or Star Trek? Star Wars won. And I asked a question I think that Ian and Ehab would find useful, whether it's positive or negative. What is this worth to you per user per month? Not what do you think it's going to cost? What is it worth? So I won't read those out loud. I'll let you guys. You guys should be able to see that if you go to the polls section down in the bottom there. But I mean, that is, if they're saying that's what it's worth to them, that is more like the expectation of what these people are thinking it's going to cost. And if it's worth that to them, that still doesn't mean that they'll actually buy it. So I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of what the crowd is feeling right now.
Interesting. Yeah, that's no, thank you. I appreciate it. Definitely. We can look at the. I'm looking at them right now.
So, let's see. I know there are more questions. I'm going to try and breeze through them all. Brad said he's having a hard time understanding the product or how to sell it. Is there some type of white labeled marketing material available that he can include with when he goes to sell his managed services to his clients? I feel like, if this is in the less than $10 per user price, this is something, Brad, in my opinion, that should just be included with your fully managed service package. That's just me. All right, so Ehab, do you guys have any type of marketing material that we MSPs can use with our customers?
Absolutely. So we have we've got data sheets and white papers, and you can actually get access to all of that. So just go to plurilock.com/MSP, and you'll be able to get access to anything you want.
And are any of these items what we call white label? So they have a spot for us to slap our own logo on it?
Yes. So every document out there does have a version where you can put your own logo on there.
Wonderful. I think that's really important for all vendors to do when it comes to having MSP reseller partners. If you're not going to give us the tools that we need to market and sell your product, we're being set up for failure. So the fact that you're providing that, this is good.
Yeah, and one thing to bear in mind is that we are at the stage where we are starting to sign up MSPs. We're focusing a lot on trying to make you successful, and in turn, of course, make us successful.
Do you integrate with any MSP products right now, like ConnectWise, Autotask, or the Datto products, I should call them now, Kaseya, anything like that?
We don't, but it's as I mentioned, it's an open platform, so it's very it's not hard difficult to do. So depending on the MSP and the platform, we're certainly willing to talk.
Do you have any integrations with things like Zapier?
We don't do Zapier per se. However, it's not that difficult to build something simply because of the fact that Zapier is completely open and we're microservices based. So it's literally shouldn't take more than a day or so.
Okay. Let's see here. Does this work well with like some type of remote desktop connection? So, for example, like somebody working from home logging into Citrix.
We actually recognize when you're connecting remotely versus locally, and so if all your connections are done remotely versus locally, then we learn it that way. Of course, there are definitely nuances when it comes to connecting remotely via Citrix, for example, where Citrix sometimes takes control of the keyboard and mouse traffic that comes back and forth. So I would say that it definitely works well, but there are some improvements that we are making in that regard.
Okay. Will you guys?
And it's really about the fact that when you're connecting remotely, sometimes the time it takes is actually not that consistent, and that's where the difference takes place. So what we're doing right now is trying to look at specifics like Citrix, for example, and make sure that we have that we take a little bit more control of that timing and the time log, so that we can ensure that we're a lot more accurate.
So I think we touched on the fact that this would be fantastic for like banks and doctors' offices and that type of stuff. So do you guys sign BAA, for example?
Say that again, Steve. Sorry, I didn't get that.
Are you guys willing to sign a BAA, I believe it's a business associates agreement for HIPAA compliance.
Let's talk and see.
Okay. And the reason that answer is going to be very important, because if that answer is no, then I have to word this wisely. Any MSP that is doing HIPAA the way that an MSP is supposed to be doing HIPAA will require a BAA from any of their vendors, especially the ones that that are being utilized for like that doctor's office. So
Yeah.
if your software is getting deployed onto one of the computers at that doctor's office, my understanding is you're going to need to sign a BAA, or else you're still on the hook. You just have even more liability now.
Yeah.
So the BAA, I think, is more to cover your assets. So
I mean, it's a good question. And we're not opposed to signing it. It's just because I'm not a lawyer. We'd have to make sure the lawyer actually
I
signs
understand.
it.
I understand. Let's see here. Will this solution work as an acceptable replacement for multi-factor authentication, or call from Azure AD Plan 1? Users hate multi-factor calls from Active Directory.
We have a for Active Directory federated services, we have a plugin that acts as a silent second factor authentication. So as you're signing in, use the way that you type in your user ID and password to authenticate you, and that's integrated already with ADFS, so you can use it with things like Office 365, for example. We're also working on a Windows login plugin to act as a silent second factor authentication as well. So so we're integrating with Windows Hello and credentials providers for Windows, so that we can, again, the way that you're typing in your user ID and password in Windows would act as a silent second factor authentication.
Okay. Are there any known issues or conflicts with any malware, AV, data loss protection, prevention type applications?
We have never seen that happen in any of our deployments so far. And a lot of them have antivirus software, and nothing has ever actually come through.
So not that it will never happen in the future, it just hasn't happened yet.
Well, I mean, because antivirus software and malware and Windows, they're always evolving, right? And
Right.
So you never know that one day maybe Windows might come up with some kind of an update that thinks that an antivirus software is malicious. Right?
But at the same time, I think there are steps that you can take to reduce the possibility of being detected as a threat, like application signing and that type of stuff.
Yes.
And you guys are,
and we do all that.
Perfect. Okay, so that's good. Now, with that said, though, so several months back it was a whitelist tool. So basically, it wasn't antivirus; it was literally you whitelist the applications you want to use, and it's called Threat Locker. So it might be a good idea for you guys to have a list of all of the applications that would be running or something like that, or for you to just get, I can even put you in touch with the Danny over at Threat Locker if you want, because I would love for you to make sure that your software is detected properly with his. So
Sure. No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
We definitely would take it up on that.
If this helps with HIPAA reporting and monitoring, does it natively integrate with any EMR or identity management systems?
We protect the workstation, right? So what that means is that EMR typically requires that that you're using that workstation. So it's typically what ends up happening in a lot of clinics, for example, is you've got the same user ID and password for one workstation, and then the doctors will, if it's a web-based EMR, the doctors will then log in to that EMR separately as they access it. I've seen some clinics, for example, where you don't get access to the workstation unless you're logged in as each individual doctor, but that a lot of the time that takes more time. So we protect the whole workstation if you are logged in as from the operating system level. On the EMR level, we do have a web-based component that again acts as second factor authentication that allows you to, the way you enter user ID and password as a doctor can use it as a protection as well. But that's in beta release right now.
Okay. So what if, my techs or me are remotely logged into a client computer? Is it going to flag me as an unauthorized user?
If you are logged in, sorry, I got distracted by the notes on the side, Steve. So if you could repeat that again.
No problem. And you can ignore that. I've been trying to keep an eye on those as well.
Okay.
So if end user has Plurilock running, they're doing their thing, they get an error, they call me for tech support. I remotely access the computer, screen connect, whatever. It doesn't really matter what tool I'm using.
Yeah.
Plurilock is going to detect me as not the user because I'm using the computer differently than they would, right?
Yes.
So it could potentially lock me out.
That's why one of the capabilities of the software is to allow you to pause that protection. So as an IT guy, if I'm going to install Office or install something on a workstation or access that workstation, before I do that, I could just pause it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, however long I think it should be, and it will just ignore everything I do at that time.
Okay. Is there a trial?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a trial. That's good. Now, I know I tried to beat you guys up a little to do some type of discount, and that didn't seem like it was going to happen. But I'm also looking in the chat here. So what if I said I want to do a group buy? And I want to do a group buy for everyone that's a member of MSP webinars. I would need it to be multi-tenant, so that way each person has their own account. I don't want there to be security issues. Is that something that you guys can work with me to do? Where I'm the one that's paying for it all. They'll pay me, but that way we can try and get the discount for volume eventually.
I'm sure we're open to discussing that for sure.
Okay. Because I want to make that happen for my people. I think this could be a good thing. Obviously, I need some guys that know what they're doing and have the test environments to actually go through and test this. So I see Cliff and Zach talking about this. If you guys want to test it out, or if maybe we can work together offline after the webinar and work out some type of like trial account for us to play with. I definitely want to look into this further because I think this is something that can help my people here.
That sounds very good, yeah, and we'd definitely love to talk more about that.
Perfect. So with that said, we've gone through all of the questions so far, except for Glenn. Glenn wants to know if there's a refund policy if he doesn't like it.
It's paid per it's recurring license fees, right? So when you want to stop, you stop.
Glenn, I'll tell you what, I will refund the ticket that everything you paid for the ticket to today's webinar if you're unhappy, okay? This guy, let me tell you, this guy, never happy. Is there a contract, or is this just a month-to-month pay for usage type thing?
Depends on the situation. I mean, in a SaaS environment, we could do it month to month, depending on the situation. But yeah, I would actually discuss that offline more.
Oh, okay. So what I'll do is I'll have a conversation with my people about this after the webinar, and then I can circle back. Should I just get with Ian first, or should I go to you, Ehab?
Probably both me and Ian would be fine.
I'll circle back with you two. There's going to be so many circles. I'm going to circle back with them, and then I'll circle back with you guys, and then I'll circle back with them to tell them what you said, and then circle back, and I'll get dizzy. I'll fall over, and we may come up with a deal.
That sounds good.
All right. If you could be so kind to give us that demo.
Sure, absolutely.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Just log in here.
And you can tell Cliff really does watch like every one of these videos. He said, yearly makes us sad, as Steve says.
This is just a very quick overview of what the administrator would see. So, think of, from an endpoint perspective and from the endpoint agent perspective, there isn't anything to show. It's just an agent running in the background, and most of the time end users don't even see it anyway. But the part that I'll sort of give you an idea of is just the continuous authentication piece of it, which is we have, once you've set it up, you've got different sites, for example, so different, potentially different customers or different groups of people. Within each site, you have registered accounts. So these are people who are actually using the system right now. So, for example, you've got this user ID, that user ID, and depending on the actual user, if I were to log into that or drill into that user, you can see, for example, that there's some information on that user ID. He's got a whole bunch of profiles. Windows, so he's got a Windows profile that's local using that keyword, for example, and that's a master profile. You scroll down a little bit, you can see that the different devices that this user is using and what the status of their enrollment looks like. So you can, so that you get an overview of that. In our latest release, which this isn't right now, so we have a more clear picture of this and a little bit of a change to that. But where you actually see what's going on the system is in the authentication logs. So here you're able to see a log of what is happening within your system right now. So you've got all the users, for example. So for every user, for every site, what kind of client are they using? Are they using a keyboard or a mouse, for example? And then the decision that is being taken. So you'll notice here that there's a risk level based on that decision. And then granted basically means that this is a match and we have a very high confidence level that this is that person. And if there is any kind of false alarms or being locked out, for example, or the action that's being taken, it would sort of show up here. So it gives you that idea from here. Now, the more important thing is if I were to show you the configuration and some of the things that you can do with the system. This is where you configure the system at first, and then you leave it autonomously run after that, where you basically decide, okay, you've got 3 different groups within my users, and I can assign each of the users to one of these regular, sensitive, or privileged groups. Do I want to track the keyboard biometrics or not? Do I want to track the mouse biometrics or not? So do I want to use them for sensitivity? Risk policy is sort of a way to allow you to be a bit more lenient with your users. If you're in a very high strict or high security environment, you can disable that, and what that means is that it will treat it'll be a lot more strict in the way that it reacts with the user. From a behavior perspective, if there is an anomaly detected, should I lock the screen or not? So you can decide what to do with that. If there's and if I do lock the screen or there is a negative event detected, for example, what kind of out of band notifications are not? So is there some kind of a second factor authentication that I may want to use or not? And again, depending on the group, as well as last of all, you can actually set the sensitivity level. So keystroke matching sensitivity, you make it high sensitivity or low sensitivity, depending on the group as well. And that really determines how close we consider you as an end user to your profile before we consider that some kind of a negative event. Now, there are a lot of other things within the system, like configuration, integration with Splunk, the email services, the logs, and the SMS, and all that kind of. There are a lot of things that we can sort of go through. But I just wanted to give you a very quick overview.
This is good. Okay, so let's talk about biometric. Enable keystroke biometrics. Zach said just a perception comment. You should probably avoid the use of the word keystroke because people might go keylogger crazy on you again. Okay. So Ian, I'm sorry, can you share that again? Because I wanted to look at that and just talk about some of those things I was seeing. Thank you. Mouse biometrics. Even if you just said keyboard biometrics instead of keystroke, that would probably. Now, risk policy, and I understand that there's probably more to it than just the keyboard. I'm just, again, this is perception. This is Zach bitching to bitch, and also helping you guys save face in the future.
That's awesome, actually. No, I appreciate that. And just a backgrounder, Steve. This is the previous version. We're about to release the newer version in the next 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
And we've actually gone through a revamp of a lot of the labeling and a lot of the nomenclature based on the feedback that we've received from the market so far.
Okay. So
yeah.
So the biometrics part seems pretty standard. Regular, sensitive, and privileged. So this is basically like a good, better, best, or a user, manager, executive, or something like. Is that kind of what I'm understanding this as?
Correct. So let's say, for example, the privileged user might be maybe users who have access to a lot more sensitive systems that can do a lot more damage to your environment, whereby regular users are just the day-to-day end users.
Okay.
We don't have admin rights, for example.
So sensitive or privileged could be somebody that has access to HR or accounting or that type of stuff. Whereas regular would just be the minions.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So now looking at behavior, enable risk policy. So turning the risk policy on for regular. That is actually making the biometric data more strict, correct?
Yes. So when you enable the risk policy, what that's making it is actually making it less strict. So it listens a little bit longer to you before deciding whether you are this is anomalous or not.
Okay, so maybe you should rename it to enable risky policy because it's a little risky for us to. All right. So, all right. Behavior, lock screen on suspected intrusion. Now, I'm going to assume that this is either a demo or maybe your own office or something like that. So this is not the recommended use to not lock anybody out, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of it is to remain secure. And this is our office one, and a lot of the time we turn it on and off depending on the environment. So we just we test it out internally first. So somebody must have just turned it off, but yeah, depending on how you want to do it.
Okay. So I would say that again, perception, having all of those off, even especially now knowing it's your office environment and not a test environment, I feel like you guys should be eating your own dog food and protecting your own environment. But that's just me.
Good point.
Out of band notifications, is that where it sends some type of alert to me or the end user?
Yes. So this sends it to the end user. So we're trying to keep the administrator away. Or out of the loop, just simply not out of the loop, but to keep the administrator from having to do a lot more work. So what ends up happening with this right now is that if for whatever reason we detect an out of band, so we will send you an SMS to say, hey, was this you or not, as an end user. So if I'm an end user, I'm at lunch and suddenly I get one of these SMSs, that means somebody is probably on my workstation. I can actually respond, yes, it was me, or I can say, hey, it wasn't me, in which case the computer would get locked as well automatically.
Okay, and then can we scroll down to the next? Oh, there's nothing after security. Okay, so the keystroke sensitivity, again, perception keystroke, but high would be highly sensitive, highly likely to kick you out if you don't appear to be you.
Yes, so it would be not highly likely to kick you out, but highly likely to say that you are not the profiled person.
Okay. Now, let's see. I see static. Okay, so now I'm looking across that little menu along the top. I see dashboard, static auth, continuous auth, system config, and system management. Where are we right now? System config.
We are within continuous authentication config.
Okay. So do each one of those areas have its own little config?
Each of these, yeah. So we've got, I mentioned earlier on that we've got the static authentication piece. So that's sort of the web-based, you can protect any website. So you have its own configuration as well as authentication logs as well. So you can have it for this or this. System, of course, is all system-wide information. So all the, the SMS service for the whole system, the email service, password authentication, the Splunk integration, login data retention as well, we can control from there, as well as you've got things like being able to manage the administrator accounts for this admin console and the roles and permissions. Then a whole bunch of server-related things. So the system log, for example, what's been happening on this system. And if you've ever dealt with highly regulated military environments, for example, you know that on the admin console you need to be able to log everything that happens. So that's where it sort of shows up, as well as licensing, of course.
Zach, I'm going to ask you a question here in a minute. So going back to systems management, I saw email. So when would this email, or was it email? Systems management? There was email somewhere. Yeah, there. When would it email and why?
Email is mainly for the administrators. So as you sign on more administrators, or you want to get some alerts, for example, you can get that through email.
So, for example, even though this doesn't directly integrate with something like ConnectWise or Autotask or Insert Here, you can at least send an email that creates a ticket, because it would just go to help at Taylor IT Group, whatever, to say Glenn Livet was locked out of the computer for not typing the normal way he types.
Not in this specific version that you're looking at, but in our next version, we'll be able to do that, yes.
Okay. And let me think. I'm just trying to think of like big picture here. So when it's locking someone out, all it's really doing is like the equivalent of Windows L, right? Where it just does a lock screen.
Correct.
Okay. So it's not like the sirens go off and a strange light starts flashing above your monitor. It doesn't. It's nothing like that. It's literally just locking the screen, and they just have to log back in.
Yes, that's by default. However, there is nothing to stop you from, because we integrate to something like Splunk or any other SIEM system, there's nothing to stop you from having a light and a siren go off on top of the user's head if that's what the company wants.
It's either going to look really bad or really good. I mean, if a bunch of quarters start falling out of the bottom of the desk, then people are going to get excited for that guy, right? All right. So Zach asked, what did he ask? It has to do with the static auth section. So you mentioned websites. So my question is, can I just get this for the MSP Webinars website and have like biometric authentication for when they log into their account? Or is that's stupid and that's not how this works?
No, that's exactly how the static website authentication is meant to work. It's a piece of JavaScript that you put onto any login page on any web page, and it will call the BioTracker APIs to learn the way that you've typed in. The interesting thing is, because again it's behavioral biometrics, right? So we have to learn how you're typing your password and user ID and password. And so what that means is that we eventually, it takes us a little bit of time. So we're not going to protect you instantly from the first time you log in. We have to, watch you for, about 10 times before we actually start protecting.
That makes sense, yeah. Now, for the website, does that still require the agent on the computer and the agent and the website work together?
No, it doesn't. So the website is almost like a completely separate module.
So I could literally put this on my website where the MSPs log in to get access to the member portal, and they don't have to have the agent on their computer.
Yes.
And then when and now this is me just out of sheer curiosity. am I paying the single license price because it's on one website, or am I paying for every single member that logs in? Or is that just a different price altogether? You know what I mean? Like,
no, it's still per user or per member, but because it's the volume of members is completely different from an employee perspective, it has different levels of pricing.
okay. Okay. Now, Zach's question was the static config. That's basically biometric for the typing of the password and using the biometric as that second factor. And I think you stated that you said that before I even read you off his question, that the JavaScript is going on my website, which is watching how people type and calling the biotracker and telling them, right?
Correct.
So basically the answer to Zach's question is yes. Okay. And then one more question here. Can we set this up to sync with LDAP to set your policies based on where the user is located in the organizational unit?
That's a good question. We don't. The agent doesn't really care about the type of user on the device or on the machine. So whether that's that's an Active Directory user or something, or a local user on the machine, it doesn't really care. It's just it will log, register, and enroll that user the same way. So, but I'm not sure if that was the question, or if I've not answered the question or not.
Eric said no.
So perhaps, yeah. So if you can perhaps rephrase the question or be a bit more clear, then I can.
I think what he's saying is, so in Active Directory, there's organizational units, and we as MS people, we as, and it's a Tuesday, guys. Oh my goodness! So we as MSPs, we might use Active Directory to do this crazy thing, like keep our users organized. So we might have an OU for the marketing team, an OU for executives, an OU for accounting, that type of stuff. So does it currently, or will it in the future, have the ability to basically set if they're a standard, restricted, or enhanced, or whatever your three sets of settings were, based on their OU where they live?
Okay. So, yes, we plan that in the future. We certainly do plan to have more integration with Active Directory and LDAP in general. We don't have it today simply because we want to sort of focus on the endpoint and whichever user is using that endpoint. But yes, it is definitely part of the plan.
And do you have an estimate of when you think that'll be ready?
It's probably it depends on the customers that we get, but it's likely won't be in the next 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
Will not be, right?
So likely not until at least Q2 of 2019 at the very soonest.
Yeah.
Unless you get a bazillion MSPs and they all say we need this.
Yeah, unless we get a bazillion MSPs, yeah, exactly, and they're willing to pay us, and we'll be happy.
So, similar question. And this question is to Eric. Eric, what other ways could you organize your end users in order to deploy these agents? Like, for example, you are ConnectWise, if I recall correctly. So, for example, you could have a little drop down on each computer or something that says regular, executive, something like that, where it assigns the policy based on that. That just takes a lot of manual work on your part, because it's a lot harder to go through into each individual thing and choose a drop down or radial or checkbox or whatever versus just moving things around in Active Directory. Is that an accurate statement, Eric? And while I wait for Eric to respond, let's see here. Zach, following up on our earlier question about the static authentication, what if we're using a password manager? Like I use 1Password.
That won't work. So if you're using a password manager, or you're using a just your browser caching in the password, that will not work. We actually will prevent. You'll have to re-enter the password again.
So you won't even let us use that on the website if we've got the BioTracker JavaScript installed.
Yes.
That's awesome and annoying. I mean,
yes.
You know what I mean. I mean, it's fine if you're using that as a factor, but you know, it's give and take. You know, it's security.
It is.
Brian said, "Okay, that's too far. I'm out." I don't know if he's being serious or not.
More than use the continuous authentication one. This way you don't have to worry about it. You can still use the
right, and the continuous one would just be the one that's on their workstation agent.
Correct. Yeah.
Eric's. So if we use the LastPass Enterprise for our clients, then we cannot use your system. And Eric, to clarify, this is regarding the static authentication. So you can actually, on a website, install some JavaScript on that website, like as the web designer or developer, right? You can install some JavaScript onto the login page where it's tracking the way that they type in their username and password and passing that information over to the BioTracker. So I'm sorry, I saw Brian and I got distracted. So this would not allow them to use the password keeper to automatically fill in the username and password. And Brian says he strongly encourages his users to use those tools so they have crazy passwords that can't get hacked or are less likely to get hacked, or at least unique enough that if one gets hacked, the rest of their stuff isn't hacked. So the static authentication, as cool as that sounds, I don't know if that is what MSPs are looking for right now, just so you know. Although that might be a big thing in the enterprise world. You know, if you've got people that are using an intranet and they have to type in a username and password just for that one page. I don't know, man. I'm just letting you know what the people are saying.
No, good point. Good point. I mean, in fact, I mean, that's part of the reason why we always lead with our continuous authentication, because that's where we think is a stronger use case and is required more. And frankly, the static authentication piece on a website for us, I mean, there are other people out there who do it, so we don't really want to get into that space that much. For us, it's more important to focus on continuous authentication and protecting the workstation.
Okay. Going back to that Active Directory thing. So I asked Eric if there was an easier way for him to do it. He said we could create an EDF for that, yes, but if there is no API or CLI for provisioning, then that would be pointless. So there is an API for Plurilock. Can the API be used for deploying out and provisioning the client, the end user, whatever?
We do. The client is actually an MSI file, and so you can use MSI execute or any of the policy-based tools to just deploy that to as many workstations as you want.
And you could also add some / commands, I assume, so that way you can say this belongs to XYZ organization, to ABC policy, that type of stuff.
Correct. Yeah. So that's that's pretty much all the anything that you can do with Active Directory there, or with with deployment, you can do that. The key thing is that while you're deploying our MSI, you're also you also send the configuration information with it too.
Okay. And once it's deployed, can we change their config? Like, can we change them to from a regular to a restricted or vice versa?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's on the admin console. You just go in and change them.
Okay. Eric, did I answer your question well enough, man? I want to make sure that this is addressed for you. And he's asking if this can be manipulated via command line, and even if once it's installed, can we use command line to change the config?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so we could have a script that we put into our RMM tool. We'll call it Kaseya because that'll drive Eric crazy. So we could have a script in there, and we can have one script called regular, one script called restricted, one enhanced, whatever you guys call them. I don't remember. And we can just run that script on each endpoint, and then yeah. I think so. So let me ask you this, and here, I'm just trying to get big picture here. How do I want to do this? I'm sorry. I'm trying to. So I want to like draw it out for you guys because I want it to make sense. Share. Can you show? I don't know if you're able to share it on the screen. Can you share with us like the list of slash commands or whatever you call those things that go with the MSI package, please?
I don't have access to it right now, but we can
Understood.
certainly make some of these documents available.
Thank you, Jordan. Switches. I appreciate that. it's yeah. I'm sorry, guys. My brain is not going to work for the next few weeks. So I appreciate everyone's patience and putting up with me.
And just an FYI, it's the permissions can be done on the admin console. You don't need to change anything on the workstation to change permissions. So once that user is enrolled.
And that I understand, but people also like to stay in their tools. So if they can avoid going into the Plurilock admin console and they can do it all from the RMM tool, that would make everyone super happy.
Good point, sir.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Hopefully you see this. Let me make that the guy. All right. So what I'm thinking is in a perfect world, in your RMM, you're going to have why isn't it? There we go. You're going to have the company, and that company is going to have a user defined field with like their custom code of whatever that custom code is for Plurilock. And then there's going to be a script that we can use to deploy restricted settings. And I assume those settings would be the same across everyone that's restricted. So the script would pull the UDF from this spot here in the RMM tool, and it would use that restricted settings file or code or whatever that is to apply those settings to the endpoint. Am I thinking of this correctly, everyone? Well, of course it depends on the RMM. Yes, I understand that, but I'm just thinking big picture. Big picture, if the RMM supports doing all this stuff, which, I mean, heck, if Datto RMM can do it, shouldn't everything be able to do it? Oh, wait, SolarWinds can't. I'm sorry, Zach. Zach, you're going to have to change RMM tools. You can run PowerShell, yes. But how would you get this custom thing for that specific company using PowerShell? That's my point I'm trying to make is if we want to do this all in the RMM tool, we need to know the custom code for each company. Ehab, is there a special MSI for every client organization, or do you have to put a switch to assign the organization correctly?
The only thing that you need to send as part of your MSI package is just the API keys in order to hit back the server. So what ends up happening is that as part of your configuration for that MSI while you're distributing it, is you enter a few some of our configuration items, including the master key, the API key that needs to hit back the server, and then once it gets installed on that endpoint agent, then it communicates with the server and downloads the rest of the configuration based on that. So there is, there are different keys, and the values will be different based on the site that you're actually deploying and connecting this endpoint agent to.
And Zach said so he could write a microservice that passes all that. Call the microservice from PowerShell. Well, Zach, we aren't all as smart as you, Mr. Smarty Pants. We don't drink enough smart water, apparently. Need enough Smarties. Yeah, we can all hire Zach to do all that for us, I think. All right, so I think I think that covers everything. Ehab, Ian, do you guys have any last comments that you'd like to leave everyone with? Some words of wisdom.
Well, I mean, thank you for the very engaging discussion. It's definitely, you're a lively group, that's for sure.
We try.
And one of the things that I just want to make sure of, because today I didn't really talk at all about our MSP program, because frankly, our product and technology is just too cool and more interesting. But I mean, you can find more on the /MSP link that I keep talking about, the plurilock.com/MSP. And thank you. Thank you very much for listening and staying this long.
Thank you guys. And I do hope that this was received well by you guys, Ian and Ehab. I really enjoyed this. I think as ridiculous as some of our conversations usually are here at MSP webinars, we do learn a lot. And I feel like you have a great service. I will say that with the caveat of I want to try it and see it in action and see if it actually is a great service. But it's one that I think is at least worth giving a trial and checking out for yourselves. So so for those of you that are watching this later, feel free to reach out to me and see how it went. See if I've got some type of special group buy thing going on that will be for members only for MSP webinars. Zach and Cliff and anyone else that wants to have a serious discussion about some type of group buy, can you guys please meet me in the Zoom room immediately after the webinar? Ehab, Ian, you guys rock, man. Thanks so much. You guys are very good sports about all of this. I think you guys gave great responses to all of our questions, both the serious ones and the ridiculous ones. And I look forward to seeing another webinar from you guys in like another 3-4 quarters to see all the changes and upgrades and everything else that you guys have done. So don't be strangers, all right, guys?
We won't, for sure. Thanks so
All
much.
right. Thank you so much. All right, so everyone, before we close out, just a quick reminder, Thursday we've got Sophos on for a webinar, and they have extended $1,000 to $49.99 special pricing tier for everyone, new and existing customers. Next week, we have SolarWinds and Central doing a tech demo. And then the following week, we've got cloud-hosted desktops, workstations, and desktops as a service with CloudJumper and our mastermind group that we do every month. So if any of those are remotely interesting, just go to mspwebinars.com and register for those now, and it'll give you a little link you can click on to add it to your calendar, whether you're a Mac, a PC, a Office 365, or a G Suite. It'll let you add it to your calendar so you don't forget about it. Thanks so much for attending this, everyone. This was fun. I like doing these with you guys. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you on Thursday. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.